Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in tonight. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan, the Miami Book Fair, and all of us at Books and Books, I welcome you to a virtual evening with Alex Segura to discuss his new book, Star Wars: POE DAMERON, Freefall, published by Disney Lucasfilm Press. Alex Segura is an acclaimed writer of novels, comic books, and podcasts. He's the author of the Pete Fernandez Mystery Series, including the Anthony Award-nominated crime novels Dangerous Ends, Blackout, and Miami Midnight, and a number of comic books, most notably the superhero noir The Black Ghost, the YA music series The Archies, and the Archie Meets collection of crossovers featuring real-life cameos from the Ramones, B-52s, and more. He is also the co-creator, co-writer of the Lethal Lit Crime YA podcast from iHeartRadio, which was named one of the best podcasts of 2015 by the New York Times. By day, he's the co-president of Archie Comics, a Miami native. He lives in New York with his wife and children. In conversation with Alex tonight is Chantel Acevedo. Chantel was born in Miami to Cuban parents. She's the acclaimed author of adult novels such as The Distant Marvels, which was a finalist for the 2016 Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction, and she's also a professor of English at the University of Miami, where she directs the MFA program. Muse Squad, The Cassandra Curse, is her debut middle grade novel. Chantel lives with her personal Muse Squad, aka her family, in Florida. Throughout this evening's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions by clicking the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to those right after the conversation. Remember, you can order Star Wars: POE DAMERON, Freefall, Muse Squad, or any other book you might need by pressing the green button below. Every purchase you make helps keep Books and Books up and running during these very difficult times. And now, without further ado, I'd like to bring our guests to the screen.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
This is where now we are revealed as like twinning.
We're twinning.
Yes, we did not plan this, but it's very cool.
No, we didn't. It's
That would have
awesome.
been funny. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. We obviously already have used the Force.
Yes, we've connected on a mental level.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's my pleasure to be talking about this super fun book with you at Books and Books, or virtually at Books and Books, which is our hometown store.
Yes, much love to Books and Books. When I was talking to them, I said I can't have a new book without doing a Books and Books event. It's like a tradition. It's just part of my DNA. So
of course,
happy to be here.
Yeah, and so I hope everyone enjoys our conversation today. I've got a couple of questions for you, but please do feel free to use the Ask a Question button to ask a question, and we'll get to those. And of course, the by Star Wars POE DAMERON book. I've got my Kindle version here, but I was telling Alex I was running out of space in my house.
Yeah, here it is. It's got a pretty cover.
It's so pretty. Look at Zori, so cute. I love it. It's great. They did such a good job with the cover.
Yeah, no, and it's funny. The artist is a comic book artist, and he actually did an image for my wedding for my groomsmen and groomspeople, like years ago. Well, almost. I should know the year, 2013. Yeah, so a while ago. But it was just, and he's done the POE DAMERON comic book, so it was really neat. This guy Phil Noto, one of the nicest artists in comics. Yeah. Did you have any input in that, or was that sort of a happy coincidence? It was just a coincidence. He's done a lot of Star Wars stuff, so it was really like nice synergy that he got to do it. So it was really cool.
Well, let's jump in. I have so many questions.
Sure, I'm ready.
It was so fun. It was so fun reading this book. So there's a moment really early in the novel where Poe and Zori are talking, and he hesitates about making a decision, and she asks him, "Are you a diplomat or a spice runner, Poe?" And he says, "I'm a complex individual," which one feels like such a Poe response, such a Poe response. But as I was reading the book, I thought, well, yeah, Alex really does reveal him as a very complex individual, right? We learn about his parents, and we learn about his upbringing on Yavin 4, and we learn about his choice to join up with this group of spice runners, right? Which we know from the movies, right? Because they talk about that past, which you explore. Right. So
I guess my question is, how did you, come up with these complexities, right? Because you make him so rich.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I think one of the challenges, and I think, the movies are the big epic moments for everybody. That's where you see all the characters have their big beats and have their big kind of character, it's the epic universe spanning battle, but, so many details are left out about these characters we love. And so once you watch, Rise of Skywalker, you're like, he was a spice runner. That's crazy. Or who is Zori Bliss? And who's this Babu Frick? So the novel really gave me the room to explore not only those characters and those beats, but, he is a complicated guy. He's not just another Han Solo, like a lovable scoundrel. That's an element of him, but he's also super loyal, no matter the situation. And I think the complexity, the challenge with being a spice runner is that he knows it's not right. He knows what he's doing is technically wrong based on, the legacy his parents left him. They both fought in the rebellion. They both are heroes. And, but he's also a teenager. So he's going to push back against this legacy and kind of predestiny that he's not sure he wants yet. So I wanted to show that, and to really show that, he's the Poe we were going to see in Force Awakens, the one we're going to meet, but there's still a way to go before he's ultimately that Poe. He's got to find himself and kind of figure it out, but he's still a hero. He's still a good person at heart, but he's not really sure of himself yet. He's still trying to figure it out. And there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, there's a moment when he decides, yeah, I'm going to join these people, these kind of shady characters, because I want to get off this planet, and I want to explore the galaxy, and my dad is not letting me do that. He's really kind of hampering me. And it felt like a really true response for someone who was 16 years old. Like, I think we've all been there. Like, we kind of throw caution to the wind, and we'll deal with the repercussions later. So he's a much more impulsive character than the Poe we meet later, which says a lot because he's pretty impulsive in the movies.
Yeah. I thought that sort of that moment where he decides, I'm going to join up with these folks, with the Spice Runners, and in the beginning he's not quite sure what they are. He doesn't know exactly what they are, but he knows that they're the way off the planet, right? Like they're the way to a kind of freedom he hasn't been able to enjoy before. I love that moment because, especially when you're talking about a YA book, because this is a young adult novel, right? The choices the main characters make become so important. They're so formative, these choices, and it's where they start to really step onto that growth path of like what it means to be someone heading into adulthood, right? Like leaving childhood behind, shedding some innocence, right? And so in those choices, we see those first steps. And so that to me, I'm so glad you mentioned it. And so yeah, like I love it. It's when we start to really hear his voice for the first time. But
yeah, it's kind of I mean, I can read a little bit from that passage. I just want to make sure that was what we were doing. So this is the scene where, just to give you a little sense of where Poe's at, his mother, Shara Bay, who was also a rebellion pilot, passed away when he was very young. And so he's on Yavin 4 with his dad, who was a Pathfinder, which is kind of like a Navy SEAL, basically, like a on-the-ground troop, but a specialized troop. And, he fought on the Battle of Endor. So he's like another hero, but Kes Dameron is reeling from the loss of his wife. So he's become super overprotective of Poe. And, he doesn't want Poe to be a pilot. He doesn't want Poe to leave Yavin 4. Poe's not up for that. He's gotten in trouble a number of times with the authorities, and he's become this kid who is trying to find his way. And after a really intense confrontation with his father and with his father's friend, Lulu Lampar, who is like a pilot friend of a friend of both of his parents, and both of them are just saying, you have to just straighten up and kind of do what you need to do. And Poe's like, why should I do that? I want to be a hero. I want to be something else. I don't want to just be in this quiet life. And so he runs into this watering hole on his home world, and he runs into some kind of tricky people, and we'll take it from there. So let me read that. Let me put on my abuelo glasses. And okay. All right. So the scene, let me start. The temperature seemed to drop around Poe as he took a seat at the table with Zori's group, her hand on his shoulder. This is Poe Dameron, she said after she'd introduced her comrades to him, and he is a pilot. A pilot? He's just a boy, the Klatooinian Zori had identified as Vigilch said with a grunt. A pilot of what? A land speeder? The group laughed. The Twi'lek Poe knew as Marinda Gann heartily, the Pauian named Jen Try softly. Zori remained quiet, her hand still on Poe's shoulder. I don't see you rattling off any options that might help us get off Yavin 4, Zori said, unless I missed that while I was recruiting our ticket out of here. They want me to fly their ship, Poe realized. He swallowed hard. Was he ready for that? He'd soon find out. Jen Try turned to look at Poe more closely, their dark eyes probing Poe in a way that made him shiver with discomfort. It wasn't their appearance. Poe had seen every type of species cruise through the Yavin 4 ports. It was something else. They made him uneasy in a way he'd not yet figured out. We do need a pilot, Jen Try said, their voice hollow sounding and whispery. But are you ready to do what's needed? If you need a pilot, I'm your man, Poe said, not missing a beat. Put me to your ship and I'll get you where you need to go. Miranda Gann laughed. That's all well and good, Poe Dameron, but do you want to get where we're going? She asked. That's the big question. Well, I mean, I can just drop the coordinates and plot the course. It's not that complicated. Zori's hand gripped Poe's shoulder. It's not getting there that's the problem, Poe, she said. It's what we're doing. We're not traders or members of the mining consortium. Our travels are a bit more adventurous. Poe waited a beat before responding. Adventure's what I'm after, Poe said, the words reaching his mouth fully formed, as if coming directly from his heart instead of his brain. I'm not afraid of I'm not afraid of that. I'm done with Yavin 4. Zori's grip loosened, and she took the empty seat to Poe's right. Their eyes met. I'm not going to dance around what we are, Zori said, because you seem smart, and even if you do get scared and tell anyone, we'll be gone before it can mean anything. Poe nodded. Vigilt raised a hand, as if to try and stop Zori from continuing. She ignored him. We're smugglers, she said flatly, and our pilot is dead. If you can get us off this moon, you will begin a life of adventure and uncertainty unlike anything you've imagined. This place will be a blurry memory before too long. Smugglers. Poe leaned back in his chair. He hadn't considered the possibility, but the information revealed the fork in the road in front of him. The pounding in his chest grew louder, drumming through his veins into his ears and head. Was this what he wanted? Like he had said, he wanted adventure, a chance to fly free and leave Yavin 4 behind. But was throwing his lot in with smugglers the best way to get there? To achieve what he dreamt of? A chance at a life not mired in the ordinary and mundane? He'd met his fair share of unsavory characters before, bounty hunters, arms dealers, and other smugglers. They'd wandered through gullies from time to time, but those were fleeting encounters, and Poe could always keep his distance. This was very different. If he threw his lot in with this group, he wouldn't just be in the same room as a band of criminals. He would be a criminal too. What would Shara Bay think of that? This would not be the kind of thing Poe could backtrack from. Joining forces with a group of smugglers would mean he'd never see Yavin 4, Lulo, or his father again. But it was the only opening that pointed towards the freedom Poe hungered for. Maybe he could make it a temporary stay, find his way off the moon, then strike out on his own. The rationalization calmed Poe a bit. He still felt a pang of sadness at the idea of leaving, but it was soon replaced by a determination and desire he'd only grazed over in the past few months. I'm in, Poe said with a quick nod. And that's it.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's this moment of you take us down all of his options in his thinking. You know, like you really take us through his thinking, which is an element of kidlit that I love so much because the best of it does just that. You know, it lets us have that sort of that view in that mind, right? That's making these decisions for the first time. But you know, Poe is not always
like crawling into the room.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Mine will probably bust in at some point, so that's fine.
Yeah.
This is why I have the lightsaber. I'll just stop them.
Nice. Excellent way to use it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, the challenge is, it gets literal. I mean, literally he's reaching that fork in the road where it's like, what am I going to do? I know what's right. And we've all been there. I think I really tapped into those feelings of being younger, but also, you know, knowing younger kids and what they're going through. And it's just, you know the rule, you know what's right. You just want to try it because you need that sense of adventure and you want to live and kind of learn for yourself. It's whether it's being told what's right versus learning what's actually right. And I think that's the journey he's on. He gets to see the world, which is what he wanted, but he also gets to learn some really hard lessons at the same time.
Right. Well, a little bit later too, he gets into a spot of trouble over and over again, really. And there are a lot of close calls and they're really exciting. But there was a moment where he says it was in moments like these that Poe realized he hadn't experienced enough. The tough skin hadn't fully formed. And it's a moment of sort of vulnerable thinking that he has there. And so I guess my question for you is, was there a challenge there in aging him down and sort of putting a layer of innocence on him, especially when what we have in our head is a little bit more gruff, grown, confident?
Tough guy. It was challenging because you obviously want the character's not mine, so it's like there's a little less freedom, but you want the character to be recognizable. You want someone to read the book and say, okay, that's definitely Poe, but you also want to show some development. And I really wanted him to be not innocent, but just not world weary yet. He's still wide-eyed and excited and eager. And as he gets through this book, or the journey of this book, by the end of it, he's a little bit closer to the Poe we know, but he still has a long way to go. And so kind of walking through those fires and defining himself more clearly into the character we're familiar with. So that was the arc as I saw it.
Yeah. And again, even at the very end, which we won't spoil, but he makes another choice, right? And a sort of life-altering choice. Like I know.
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun. Again, without spoiling it, but that was one of the cooler scenes to write because it definitely it clarifies the path that he gets on.
And it connects things, right? It gives us that connection too with the grown Poe that we know, which I loved a lot. Let's kick it back. What's your earliest Star Wars memory?
My earliest Star Wars memory. It just feels like it's always around. We're kind of around the same age, and it was just always around. I felt I was really scared of Darth Vader. That visual was terrifying, and I think one of the earliest memories I had was seeing a bit of Empire, and his entrances were always so epic, especially when he came onto a ship or he was like in a scene. He was always the central focus. So I think it was that battle with him and Luke on Cloud City in Empire Strikes Back, and I probably shouldn't have been watching it at that age. He just cuts his hand off, like Luke falls through the hole. Like, I don't know who these characters are. I have no idea of like intellectual property or like sequels. I was like, okay, he's gone. Terrifying.
So scary.
Bye. But and I think each of the trilogies has really fun memories for me. Like, I remember going to Sunset Place to see Phantom Menace because it was just like we'd been without new Star Wars for so long, and I think now it's like this bounty of riches. Like, we have so many great movies, so many books, but there was a time where it was like we may never get another Star Wars movie, and it was really, really dark. So Phantom Menace came, and it was like, all right, we're back. So.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing the prequels. I didn't go to Sunset Place. I went to Sawgrass Mills, so I was one counting up. And I would go to the Oasis theaters and the cheers in the theaters, like when the first like da 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 like that. Yeah. And I hadn't seen it rivaled again until Endgame, and the last scene of Endgame, right, where everyone lost their minds. You're right. It was similar. Like, it was a similar energy there. But I think my earliest memory of Star Wars is not even a memory of Star Wars. It's going to see, but it is. It's going to see Empire at Palm Springs Theater in Hialeah with my older cousins. Like, my mom must have been there and my older cousins, and they were going crazy for it. Like, they were so excited, but I have no actual memory of the movie. Just their excitement in the lobby. I was little. I mean,
I remember the Ewoks. I remember the Ewoks being hugely important to me, like, as a young, like, I loved Return of the Jedi, and we watched the Ewoks movies, the TV ones, and it was just like such a cool thing. Like, and now it's this, I say it's modern mythology, basically. You're so hard pressed to find anyone who doesn't know Star Wars or is not like, and it's usually someone that's being willfully ignorant. Like, I just don't want to watch them. I want to be a contrarian, but it is as close to like modern mythology as we're going to get.
Yeah. And that was going to be my follow-up question, which is, why do you think it's so important to people? Why do people connect with it this way?
Yeah. What Lucas did early on is he really put and it's something we all do to varying degrees when creating, is we put all our influences into a blender, but a lot of his big epic influences are resonate with so many people, like the hero's journey, like certain elements about sci-fi and this mystical belief in, you know, the spirituality. I think there's a spiritual undercurrent to a lot of Star Wars that people can relate to. And while there are, you know, special characters in Star Wars, there's also the sense that anyone could be someone. You know, like Luke doesn't know he's like Luke Skywalker, son of Darth Vader, until much later in the trilogy, and obviously Rey doesn't figure out who she is until much later in the trilogy. So it's about these, you know, it's about finding yourself and kind of going on these quests and going beyond, you know, the limitations. It's a very American ideal, but it's also very like heroic idea. So I think it hits like these very popular, resonant topics that I think a lot of people can relate to, and it's like swashbuckling storytelling, I think. And all the characters are so memorable. I'm so jealous that he just knocked it out of the park. Like Chewbacca, Princess Leia, like Darth Vader. Like, is there a more classic villain than Darth Vader? I don't think so.
He's everything about it. And I think too that there's a timelessness to it.
For sure.
It's interesting being sort of a child of the 80s, you know, because I'll have my kids and I'll be like, hey kids, like I'll think of, you know, a movie that shaped me in amazing ways. It shaped Muse Squad, Goonies, the
Karate
Goonies.
Kid, or
the Karate Kid, right? Like, I mean,
but
getting my kids to be like, let's sit down and watch the Goonies, you know, and then being like approximately 10 minutes into it, horrified at the representation, like Data's representation, you know what I mean? And how she's a stereotype, like he's such a bad stereotype, and then being all like, oh, well, kids, see, this is, you know, and you have to kind of kids get it. Like my 14-year-old is like, what is this horrific thing you're like,
and you're a fan of it, and
I'm like, and you're a fan of this, you know, and so and having to, you know, contextualize all that because the world has changed, you know, and moved on. But with Star Wars, you never really have to do that because there's a timelessness to those stories. You never have to do it, and to pluck a movie out of the 70s and be like, this movie you can kind of share with anyone is really rare, actually.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to show them, The Godfather? Or like, you know, it's like some of these things like are just not. Well, it was really cool. Like my son is like 4.5, and his first Star Wars toy was Rey, which is neat because for me it was like Luke, and I'm sure for someone in between it was, you know, Anakin. You know, so there's kids that grew up on the prequels, and that's like their original trilogy, and it's gone on for so long, and it's resonated with so many people that it's become this mythological thing.
Absolutely. But yeah, for me, I think, because I think we were about the same age, it was Jedi all the way. Like I was right at the right age for that movie to come out. And so when people like make fun of it now, I get really hurt. Like that was my Star Wars.
I mean, I love Empire. I love how dark it is. I know. That's my team. Like the Ewoks are for me, but it's also, I think Jedi was the story that needed to happen. Like you needed that positive conclusion, because after Empire, it was so dark. Like, and that's the narrative arc. Like you put your heroes in the darkest corner, and they work their way out and save the day. And it's, you know, if you didn't want that, maybe Star Wars isn't for you. Like,
right.
You know,
right. Yeah. And it's even become synonymous for like the perfect part 2. Like if you're writing a sequel or you're doing anything a second time, you're like, I want Empire. Like I want to make that Empire. I don't want it to be you know, a failed sequel. It's got to be better than the first, you know?
And it's just, I love that. Empire is my favorite. I think Empire is like texturally so different from the first one. And it just shows you like this wider universe. I think you watch the first Star Wars and you're like, okay, it's this very focused story, but you watch Empire and it's like, okay, it's a much bigger landscape. So. Yeah.
Well, let's get back to Poe.
Okay.
Let's get back to Poe. The 70s could never have imagined Poe. We get other familiar faces in this story. So we get to see Zori and more of her backstory. And I love her. And I loved Kerry Russell's interpretation of her, but you've given her all these extra layers. She's so great. And then we even get Babu Frick, and I've not read the comics, but I know Kes Dameron's in the comics as well. His dad's in the comics. But there are brand new characters as well. So I wonder what that process was like for you, knowing that you were introducing this cast that would become canon, right? Like now these are now figures in the Star Wars universe. And was it like, what was that process like? And did it feel weighty at times?
Yeah, it felt intense. It was intense. You know, when they reached out and were like, would you want to write Star Wars? I said, yes, immediately, you know, and, but it was kind of a two-way street. I spent a lot of time watching the movies again and reading the books I liked again, but then I spent it also with an eye towards Poe and like taking notes about the characters that were important to him Lula Lampar is a mentor type character, but he shows up in the comics. He's not really referenced in the movies. And I said, well, let me bring him into this early story and kind of tie these things together. So there was a lot of that, like connective tissue between the established canon and the best part, I think, was adding to it, creating these new characters like Tommaso and giving some legacy to Zori Bliss and her mom and the Spice Runners crew that he deals with. And that was just fun. It was just felt like, wow, I'm really like these characters exist in Star Wars now, and they are like part of the legacy. But I didn't want to do it just to do it. I didn't want to just create these characters to kind of fill up space. I think one of the challenges whenever you're dealing with IP is you want your story to fit in with everything else, but you also want it to stand alone and be its own adventure. So if you read Freefall, I hope that people read it and enjoy it and feel like that was a fun adventure for Poe. Maybe this character you're not super well versed in, but also if you're a fan, a hardcore fan, you read it and you see all this connective story beats, characters. There's a lot of fun little Easter eggs, especially near the end. There's that epic battle and you see a lot of characters from all over Star Wars that you probably didn't expect to see. And other novels, like I'm a fan, so I was like, who's the perfect person to put in here? And 9 times out of 10 you could find it already, but I also wanted to like leave a stamp and create new characters. I don't want to spoil anything, but you want them to last, and you want them to kind of play really important roles in Poe's story.
Some of I've been sort of glancing at some of the questions that folks are asking, and one of them had to do with how much control you had over the storyline, which was a question I had too.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think a lot of people just assume, it's Lucasfilm or Star Wars, and they're going to just give you a list of things to do. And it was not like that at all. We had an initial call, and they were like, well, how do you envision this? And I said, it's a crime novel in space. It's like a heist novel. Poe's the driver, and he gets recruited by these criminals, and then he's pulled into this kind of underworld. And obviously, it kind of went from there, and we brainstormed, and there were certain beats I had to hit. Like they wanted me to kind of explore Zori's backstory, and to throw in some scenes like you have to have Babu Frick. You can't have Babu Frick. You can't have Poe's origin and Zori and no Babu. Yeah, you need to have him.
Hey!
Yeah, exactly. But you have to. But the plotting of it and kind of the weaving the stories together and picking out scenes and characters, that was me. And they have Star Wars Publishing and Media has this group called the Story Group, and basically they oversee all expanded universe stuff to make sure it's all lined up. And they were a really great resource. At first you think, they're just going to tell me what to do. It was my first one, so I didn't have any sense of point of reference, but they were very much like, no, we want you to have a voice. We want you to bring in new characters and new ideas. And we'll tell you if you go too far, or we'll tell you if you need like a plan. If I didn't know a planet, or if I needed some reference, they were really helpful. And my editor was fantastic too.
Is there a Star Wars character that you would just love to write? And it's okay if someone's already done it. Like it's okay if but like just you would love to write.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. One of the things before I answer that, one thing I want to say is that the book is as much about Zori as it is about Poe. Like obviously Poe is the star, but Zori, we see her in Rise of Skywalker for I think like 10 minutes total. Like we see her, she's very like Boba Fett, like just a great look and very intimidating. And immediately after the movie, when I saw it, I was like, this is cool because it sets up the book. Like everyone's going to want to know more about Zori or know about this time. So it was really fun to show a more, not innocent, but a more, emotional and, still becoming Zori. She's still on her way to becoming the really hard, tough, person we meet. And I wanted to make their dynamic a little more nuanced than just like romance or friend. They're just friends. Like it was a little more complicated in the way that teen relationships usually are. Like there's just a lot of emotions, big feelings, big intense moments, and that changes how you interact with each other. But in terms of other Star Wars characters I'd want to write, I feel like there's a good YA Obi-Wan story somewhere. There's just like his saga before he joined up with Qui-Gon, or like his journey to becoming a Jedi. And I didn't get to play with a lot of the mystical Jedi Force stuff in this book, which is very much a crime, gritty. I mean, as realistic as a sci-fi Star Wars novel is going to be, but pretty grounded, I thought. So I'd love to do that. Or tell another Poe book. That would be cool. Yeah.
That was one of my questions too. Like, is that because it's again, it's the end opens up Let's just say the end opens up the path for him. So is that a possibility? Another Poe book?
I'd love that. I think I wrote it, with the hope that, people would respond to the book and say, yeah, we want to see more youngish Poe, because I think he's got so many adventures before we meet him in Force Awakens. But which character would you want to write? I know you're a fan.
Gosh, see, I have a hard time choosing. I would have such a hard time choosing. I'm such a fan of like E.K. Johnston's Padme, so she did that,
Yeah, she's awesome.
And the Handmaidens, she did that. God, is it cheesy to say Leia? But it's been done, it's been done. But I just love her,
Yeah, you would do a great Leia.
Young Leia, a middle grade Leia.
Yeah.
Or a middle grade Luke, even, like them at that 11 years old.
Kind of very tiny age, yeah.
What does that look like, at that age? Or any of them really aged, down that far, which I think would be interesting.
For sure. About. Yeah, I would read that. Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe someday, you never know.
Yeah. I love that you got so excited talking about Zori, because I feel like we got just a little bit of her in the movies. And so it was nice to see her backstory and sort of her grit and also her vulnerability and how she and Poe sort of pull at each other, and reveal strengths in one another. And it's not just a sort of woo-woo, romance kind of story.
Right.
It's a friendship too at its core. It's a friendship. So I love that she was there. Did you, as you were preparing, to write her, was there any extra research you had to do, or was there just how did that feel, sort of slipping into a teenage girl's psyche?
Yeah, it was challenging. It was, because like we said, the only time we see her in the film, it's for such a short amount of time. And this is going to sound weird, but, a lot of it, I love The Americans, the show The Americans. The Kerry Russell show The Americans. And I saw a lot of similarities between Zori and Elizabeth, Kerry Russell's character. And so I just started thinking about that, and I kind of created this picture of what she would be as a much younger Zori. And I wanted her plight to parallel Poe's journey, this weight of legacy. And as you read the book, you'll discover why. You discover that there's some subterfuge tied into who she is and how she's represented in the Spice Runners. And I wanted that weight of legacy. And that's kind of what brings them together. They have this conversation early on in Poe's Spice Running time where he talks about his mom and how she's gone, and she talks about her relationship with her mom and how weighted and intense it is. And I think they're the only two teenagers in this group, and so that really brings them together, and they have this intense emotional connection. But I just tried to look to people in that age group I knew, and I tried to just be true to what I'd seen and kind of build off what was already established. So it was hard, it was challenging, but hopefully the final product felt genuine.
Yeah, I thought their relationship felt very, very true. It just felt very true and very, very sweet.
Yeah, you kind of pull back to your own, this too, as a writer, you pull back to your own experiences, and sometimes, and very often your relationships are not as clearly cut as people think they should be. It's not just this or that or anything. It's just an intense, and when you're a teenager, everything has that intensity, everything feels weighted and really important. And I wanted to inject some of that into this and not have it feel like it was just adults pretending to be younger,
Right. And also feeling like no one's listening to you. And so there's that scene where they're just cleaning the ship. They're why do we have this crummy job? And also there are different points of view. Poe's this sucks. And she's this is the order of things, and so they challenge each other, in these ways. But yeah, that felt very, very much teenagers, right?
Oh, good. Yeah. And also this is her calling, this is her life legacy, and she's embraced the legacy, whereas Poe has pushed away from his own legacy a little bit to be a Spice Runner. So I think you see, she always knows that there's this chance that he's not going to be with them for much longer. And that's what leads to the final conflict, without spoiling a whole thing. But I think we all know Poe ends up as a hero. So,
Well, she recognizes the contrarian in him, and that's what makes him interesting. He's always going to fight whatever the, offered option is,
Yeah. And he's always loyal. He's, he builds out his family with his friends. And so he's a Spice Runner, and he's with these Spice Runners, but he kind of rationalizes that because he has to be there to help Zori, to help this group that he feels some affinity to. So he's conflicted. Yeah.
Speaking of affinity, we know you're a Miami kid.
Yes.
And there's some, we were just talking about this before, how you've snuck some Miami and some of your Cubanity into the into the book.
Yeah, I mean, you have
Easter
to. Like
eggs.
all my books are Miami. I've said it. Every book I've done, every book I'm going to write is going to connect to Miami in some way. And so I think people were like, "Oh, Star Wars, how can you connect it to Miami?" But there is a scene, and I think it's when you meet Sela Troon is also one of the key characters in the book. She's an NRSB officer who has a personal vendetta against the Spice Runners. And then there's a moment where she arrives on Yavin 4 and is talking to kind of the backwater head of like Yavin 4 security, and he doesn't want to be bothered, and he's sipping Sawasera tea, which sounds super Star Wars, and now it's a tea in Star Wars. But if anyone from Miami knows what Sawasera is, then you probably picked up on it. I know you did, so that was cool.
I did, but I have to say I picked up on it and like then checked myself and thought no. I did that thing. Not that he wouldn't, but I kind of like, because I had mentioned folks before we all got live that I was pronouncing everything in Spanish for some reason, like POE DAMERON and like Tomaso. Like I was just in my head, it was all coming out like that. And so I got to Sexuality, and it was like a moment where I go, nah, because I've just been doing it. Nah. Like I noticed, but then unnoticed, if that makes any sense.
No, totally. And I think there's a star system, like an Opalak star system, which is like an Opalaka reference. Just like if it sounds like a planetary system.
It does.
So it works, and it doesn't, you know. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
I did.
It works.
I love that there's a little bit of Miami in that, you know?
Yeah, there has to be, yeah. I mean, Oscar Isaac spent a lot of time in Miami, I think.
He did.
You know,
he absolutely did. Yeah, he did. So. My daughter took some a month of acting classes, and they were very proud because they were like, "Do you know who else took acting classes here?" And that's awesome. I was like, "Oh, yeah." Wow. So that was that was very cool. But I like that Miami is in there. But I also feel like a little bit like Cass Dameron's protectiveness. There's something of the Cuban papi in there. You know what I mean? Like you are not getting off of this planet. You know what I mean? Like there's a bit of a do not even think about it. Like a sort of a hovering there that I think.
Yeah, which I think you and I deal with in our own ways, like as parents of like second generation. Like I try to be protective, but also I want my kids to experience. You know, you have to skin your knee to know that skinning your knee hurts. You know,
right.
And that's sometimes something that we didn't get as kids. Like I remember my abuela would say, "Do not step on that grate because a car will hit you, and that will be it." Like, you know, those grates on the street. You know, it's like this overprotective bubble. And I wanted to show that a little bit. That's very true. Like this sense of like, I don't want you to even risk yourself because we've experienced so much loss already that it would just be too much. You know, it's a little almost like selfish. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
no, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
And you see it so much in our culture too. Like kids who are here in Miami and want to go away to college, and their parents are like, absolutely not. You go to FIU, you go to Dade, right? Because we've sacrificed so much to be together as a family, and you're going to leave. You know, like there's that.
Yeah, and you're going to live at home. Like you're not going to go
live at home.
Dorm. Like yeah.
So carrying that trauma.
Yeah, like I was like, I want to go to NYU, and it was like, nope, you're gonna stay here. You're gonna stay here, and it was it all worked out fine. There's an intensity to the nuclear family that I think is different.
And I think it's born of a kind of trauma, and so it's echoed, you know, in his story too. I need to ask because my husband was like, "Please ask this question," but you have to know that he's like a tremendous nerd, and so I was telling him about the book. And in the beginning, in the very very beginning of the story, Poe is flying his mother's A-wing, and we know she was in the military, right? Like she's a hero, right, of that first war. And immediately he goes, "Why does she get to keep the A-wing? It's a military spacecraft." Now, like this is like such a nerdy question to ask.
No, it's a good question.
And then he added, as I was taking my notes for our chat, that he will accept no answer except straight up death because it's a military spacecraft.
He said we would only accept what?
The only answer he would accept is straight up theft.
Theft.
She stole it.
I don't think it's no, because here's the real answer. They both Kes and Sherabay joined the civilian defense force on Yavin 4, and so they just got to transfer their stuff to being civilian defense on Yavin 4.
Thank you.
And so she's, you know, it's you have a cop car. You're a cop and you have your car at home, and she probably shouldn't have been teaching Poe how to fly it. That probably was like against regulation, but
Right. Well, that's
that is an
nerdy
excellent question. I've never been asked that question before. So.
That's how his mind works sometimes. So,
Yeah.
so he's like, you have to ask. You have to ask this question. I'm like, well, that
Okay.
is super specific, but I will ask. Let me look at what some of the other folks on here are asking. Yeah. So, Jackie asked an interesting question. Did Lucasfilm give you any input in terms of character sexuality? I noticed some neutral language when Poe thought about relationships and was wondering if it was on purpose. And we did see that with Jen Try, who has they, them pronouns. Yeah.
Yeah, Jen Try I was really excited to create, introduce, a non-binary character. I think it's important to show diversity and show, this, the world we live in is also a galaxy far, far away. In terms of Poe, I think it's just, it's okay to leave things open and to just, not everyone has to be defined in a certain way in perpetuity. So it was really just, to show some variety in Poe's life, I guess, and then and leave it open to interpretation. So
and also ultimately your audience it's a YA audience, right? And YA readers, kids today have absolutely no issue with this. No issue. So, like my daughter doesn't stutter over it. Like he, she, they, them. Like she doesn't, like it's part of her reality, And
so I think totally. YA readers are not. It's not uncommon for them to see that. I think it was just. I wouldn't say it was overly purposeful. I think it was much more just the way these books are. So
yeah. It's just another. I mean, even though we're working with fantasy or magic or whatever in our stories, it's still you're still offering realism, right? In some way, in terms of sort of how the character feelings work and all of that, and that's part of realism, for us today and for young readers especially. So
exactly, yeah.
It's a good question. Thank you, Jackie. That was a good question. Yeah. Here's a good one from Hector. What did you glean from writing? What did you glean from writing YA that you'll use when writing the next project?
That's a good question. I'd written some YA before, like comics, like the Archies and Lethal Lit, which was a podcast. I wrote the plot as I would write a crime novel. The pacing and the character beats and the narrative, the kind of the nuts and bolts of the story remained the same. But in terms of YA, it was much more there was a much more, emo is not the word. It's much more self-exploration, and you want that arc of discovery. You definitely don't want the character to feel the same at the end as he did in the beginning, or as Zori did in the beginning. Like she goes through some struggles, he goes through some struggles. And the weight of those moments should be intensified, because these are initial experiences, whether they're romantic, they're fearful, they're anger, these emotional moments are much more impactful because they're so new to the characters. So I learned to turn up the volume with those moments, at least from those characters. And then you have the great contrast because they're usually surrounded by older characters who are kind of like, what's the big deal? Like, like not to boil it all down into that, but it's, their Zori and Poe's reactions to things are much more intense, and much more new and energetic. And so that's kind of the big takeaway I got, that, really teenagers are experiencing these big feelings in big ways, and to show that clearly, and also show the turmoil they're feeling, the emotional grind of like, is this the right thing? What am I doing? And having that contrast with the impetuousness of youth. Like Poe just gets on that ship. He's like, yeah, okay, I'm in. And, Zori makes some intense decisions as well. So contrasting this overthink and kind of, struggling internally with also the kind of random, freewheeling young mindset. So
yeah. And also risks, right? They take big risks, and they're these adults that surround them are constantly saying, no, don't do that. Like this is a mistake, and they're like, no, we're gonna do that. And
I can relate to that too. Like you just don't have that catalog of experiences to really guard yourself from doing it. And so they do it. And, there's certain scenes that you probably know, Poe probably won't do that again because he knows better next time, but that's kind of part of the story.
Right. And they almost always have to deal with some kind of crashing some vehicle, some crash.
Yeah. Something is blowing up. They have to shoot their blasters in a certain way. I try to really make those little vignettes as different as possible. But
yeah. No, I love it. There's one scrape that it's a crash landing that I was like, oh, that's so clever. Like that's such a clever like way of resolving it and making sure they're
Oh, good.
safe. And I won't spoil it, but I was like, oh, I could see that like in a film. It was
nice,
it was quick thinking and like and really fun. But I wanted to ask you about some of those like the space battle scenes. And I imagine they were, I mean, they were super thrilling to read, you know, so they were super thrilling. And I was left wondering, how did Alex do this? Like, how did he transfer that energy that we see on the screen to letters on a, you know, words on a page? Because it transferred really beautifully. They were thrilling scenes. So how did you manage it? Yeah.
Well, that means a lot that you said that, because I think a big takeaway for me was, you know, when kind of entering the project, was how can I really give that sense of the movies, you know, this feeling of intensity and action and character through action. Like I don't, there's a few moments where it's characters like introspectively like interacting with each other, but a lot of it is like they're being defined by these actions. And I think it's just really drama. You want to put these characters in situations where even the reader is going to say there's no way out of this. Like how are they going to, they're surrounded, they're being chased by these, you know, barbarians, or they're you know, I don't want to itemize too much what happens in the book, but there are definitely moments where you look at the story and you're like, there's no way they can get out of this. And that to me is Star Wars. That's classic Star Wars. Like you're in the trash compactor, you're in the Death Star. Like you're just not going to get out. And finding interesting ways to get them out of it, and use those moments to propel the characters forward and kind of change them. And without slowing the narrative, I tried to visualize, you know, like the screen bubbling in and out like it does in the movies, or the spinning effects, and just I wanted to write it as if it could be a movie. I mean, obviously it's a book, and it reads well as a book, hopefully, but I wanted it to have that action and kind of arc that felt satisfying. Like even though Poe's story continues and all these characters will be seen in other ways, like I wanted it to be a singular kind of dramatic beat.
Yeah. No, I think you did. I think it paid off. You know, there's and then these thrilling moments that are followed by quiet moments and soft character stuff, and then it gets thrilling again. So it's a fun ride. It's a fun ride for people who read it. Yeah. There's another new question, and it is yes, it is from Yvonne, and she wants to know if there were any things that you were told not to cover, like broad or specific restrictions from the Star Wars.
Hi, Yvonne. I do feel like I'm at a Books and Books event. I'm seeing all my friends in the crowd.
Oh, good.
No, there weren't any. You know, the cool thing about the whole process was that they were very laid back and they were very liberating. Obviously, you're in a sandbox, so you can't step out of the sandbox. There are certain things you can't do in a Star Wars story just by basis of Star Wars. But they were very welcoming, especially to the character suggestions and using characters that are established and ideas. And one of the big fun things was laying the groundwork for what the underworld looks like in Star Wars after Return of the Jedi. Like, you know, the Empire's gone, the Republic has taken over, but the Republic doesn't have the same reach as the Empire. And so you see a lot of these smaller organizations establish themselves. And I was reading a bunch of stuff about just organized crime, just thinking about crime writing when this came through or this happened, and for Miami Midnight, which I was writing, kind of finishing up at the time. So that ended up bleeding into the Poe book in its own way too, just creating this infrastructure. But I can't, and I'm not just towing the company line. I can't think of anything that they were like, you cannot do this. It was much more like they gave me the broad strokes of what had to happen, and I got to fill in the middles. You fill in those spaces and add the characters and the plot. And very rarely would they say, well, let's use somebody else. It was much more granular. Like this maybe we need this for something else. So it never felt like an edict of any kind. So
yeah. Like I imagine if you'd like, I'm reaching to bring a prop into the picture, but if you'd been like, and then Poe found a baby Yoda, like that would be like, no, Alex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they'll be like, no, Alex, not that. Do not. But if you're
I couldn't like have
a fan, you know.
Yeah, I couldn't have like Darth Vader show up or something like that, or like, you know, just anything that like went against canon that was just not in the cards. So.
Exactly, but it is kind of fun to think that this is the same time period as The Mandalorian, which I think was so well done. You know that it's
and there's a little Mandalorian little hat tip in the book.
Wait, did I miss a hat tip? A Mandalorian thing?
Okay, look at the planets that they go to, and you'll figure it out.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to look at it again. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I like that they exist, and I love that about the Star Wars universe is that you pick up a book or see a new show or whatever it is, and it expands it like in a way that you weren't even thinking of. But yeah, to have these things happening simultaneous is fun to think about.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to have, in addition to the story being fun and fitting into continuity, I wanted like little hat tips for people who are just immersed in the universe. Like, so yeah, there's a little Mandalorian little nod and just a bunch of other stuff. And even to like some of the games, like there's characters from really old school stuff that I think if you read, if you're a really huge Star Wars person and you read it, you'll hopefully like get a kick out of it.
Yeah. Well, Chris wants to know.
Boshek is in it. Which is, you know, they've had stories about it. That's the cool thing about like when you write a Star Wars novel, like it gets pieced apart, you know, picked apart immediately, like in a cool way. Like there was a trailer, like breaking down all the Easter eggs from the book, like the day the book came out, which was intense. But
yeah. Well, Chris wants to know. Yeah, Chris wants to know which Star Wars character you would get along with best.
Which Star Wars character would I get along with best? I feel like Obi-Wan. I feel like I relate to him the most. Like he's just like, you know, he's got this great ability, but he's also kind of burnt out. You know, he's just like, he'd rather just live on this planet, but he knows he's got to like pull himself out. He's a very dad character. Like, oh, fine. Okay, like I will do this. But there's a lot of love and a lot of like mentoring going on there. And
you're attracted to his misery.
Yeah,
like, I like him. We get along. He's super burnt out.
yeah, he's super tired and super working all the time. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd vibe off of young Luke's energy. You know, like he was like he's a good YA character. Young.
Yeah, totally. I think that would be just like his life on Tatooine. Yeah.
That would be great. I mean, not the whiny version where he's like, "Oh, Tashi Station," like not that guy. But you know when he, you know, in his more heroic and cheerful moments, I think.
Exactly.
That was a good question, Chris. Yes. Well, I have one last question for you, and I think someone else also has this question, which is, what are you working on next?
What am I working on next? I'm working. My next novel is called Secret Identity, and it's set in 1975, and it's about someone from Miami, a woman moving from Miami to New York to work in comics. And it's coming out from Flatiron Books, and she works at this kind of fictional comic book company, like third behind Marvel and DC. And she ghostwrites this character because she's such a fan. She wants to write, and you know, for whatever reason, the culture at the time doesn't open that door for her. And so she writes this character. It becomes a huge hit, and then her collaborator is murdered. So she has to basically become this amateur detective and figure out what happened, not only because he was her friend, but also because she wants to reclaim this character. So it's called Secret Identity. It's about her like coming to terms with, you know, with taking ownership of this character and also ownership of her passion, which is writing and creating. And it also lets me explore the world of comics at the time, which is an interesting point in comics where basically everyone thought comics was going to fizzle and go away. Like the industry was just going to fall apart. But it was also one of the most vibrant times for comics in terms of like characters and ideas and, you know, and then just throwing, you know, it's just fun just knowing comics and the way the industry works. So yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm working, there's a few comic book things. We're working on something we can't announce yet, right? So that'll be cool. So try to keep busy. What about you?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to plot out a new middle grade. It's a little on the spooky side, so a lightly spooky middle grade, so that's kind of fun. But it's very early. I just turned in Muse Squad 2 edits, so that's off now to copy edits, and that'll be fun. Thank you. Yeah, that'll come out next July. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm so excited about Secret Identity. Oh my goodness, this is such a pleasure and an honor, and we twinned and everything.
I know, it's like we just the force is great.
So I feel left out. I really should have done something different.
You had an opportunity though.
But I want to thank you both. I wish I could say like, so everyone fold your chairs and we're going to move into the next room and do the autographing. But
next year.
I feel like we're going to get there at some point.
Oh, for sure.
So thank you.
And you can buy the books. Buy some
That's
books.
right.
Buy the book. So press the green button, please, and we'll ship it out to you immediately. And if you want to pick it up at one of our stores, that's fine too. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Books and Books. Thanks for having us.
Everywhere. I'm glad we were able to continue this tradition. So
for sure,
you're not going to get away. Every single book that you are publishing, Books and Books virtual event.
I'm ready. Thank you, Chantel.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you.
So many great questions. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Good night.